This next story is an unbelievable one. When Benita Alexander met acclaimed surgeon Paolo Machiarini in 2013, she thought, and understandably, she had met the man of her dreams.
Charming, intelligent, and a pioneer of groundbreaking new surgery, Paolo was celebrated as one of the world's brightest minds.
The colleagues at the Karolinska Institute were accusing him of scientific misconduct. Several doctors who worked alongside Paolo, some tending to the patients he had implanted with new tracheas, started voicing concerns about the new procedure. In particular, they took issue with the way he'd written them up in medical journals.
I was engaged to a monster.
Paolo was an absolute fraudster, and that's why we have to stop him.
Paolo Machiarini treated people as human lab rats.
The first liver transplant, the first kidney transplant, the first heart transplant, did they go all well? No. I think that this is the future.
Was this guy a superhero, a super surgeon, and the love of my life? Or was he a dangerous con man and a killer?
Benita, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. I've been so amazed by your story. I watched the documentary. I watched season 2 of Dr. Death. I watched and read many things. And I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how are you today? And how do you feel thinking about all those things now, as of now?
Thank you for having me. First of all, it's nice to meet you. I'm great. I'm doing really well. It takes, I think, a while to recover from something like this. You know, it takes a while to build trust again, and it's more about learning to trust yourself again than trusting other people, actually, because you start questioning yourself. And it's initially, when I went public with this, it was to expose him. It was for no other reason. And I felt an urgency to do that. And I sort of thought that would be the end of it, that I would put it out there. You know, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about telling my story. It was about the fact that he had people's lives in his hands. And that was really scary. But then it sort of morphed into this other mission because women started contacting me from all over the world, which surprised me, actually. It surprised me, unfortunately, how often this type of thing happens. And not to the extent that my crazy story, but it happens a lot. And they were thanking me. And they were thanking me for being so candid and raw and willing to tell my story and being brave enough to tell it, but thanking me for making them feel less stupid and less alone, because there's a lot of embarrassment that goes along with this. So it's one of the reasons I've continued to keep talking about it, because I know that by telling my story and being so open about it, it's helping other women. I think these con artists enjoy targeting smart, intelligent women. I mean, the more successful and more intelligent the woman, the bigger the challenge is for them. And then the bigger the rush, they get some kind of sick high out of it.
Yeah.
And as a smart woman, to get conned, it is embarrassing, because the first thing you do is beat yourself up. You know, how did I not see it? How did this happen to me?
Super charming. He was.
Yes, but not just charming. They're very cunning, skilled, lying manipulators. You know, they are criminals, and there is coercion involved. There's gaslighting involved. There's manipulation, you know, and none of those things are the woman's fault. So it's really unfortunate that the finger gets pointed at the woman.
You say that in the documentary that you say it actually twice. The first time is that you think he chose you because you were a journalist and you're a smart woman. And then towards the end, you say that you're sure that's why he chose you.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the Netflix documentary.
My story's been told many times. I first went public back in 2016 in Vanity Fair, and then I made my own film called He Lied About Everything for Investigation Discovery. And I think there's sort of endless fascination with this story because of the lying across all levels, right? It wasn't just me that he lied to. He lied to so many people. He pulled the wool over so many people's eyes, you know, famous doctors, scientists, institutions. And so to have somebody that's literally lying in every avenue of their life, both personally and professionally, and then the medical lies are so appalling and egregious, and the fact that people died. And so that has made this story just endlessly fascinating. And then the fact that there hasn't been any justice, you know, that people died because of this insane experimental procedure he did, but he wasn't behind bars. He hadn't been convicted. And so there's just been ongoing interest. And a company pitched the story to Netflix, a British company called Newtopia. And then they came to me and asked me if I would participate. And what interested me this time was that they were going to take a deep dive into the medical arena, and really a thorough deep dive, and that it was all of the people that took him down, not just me, not just my story, because I'm just one piece of it, but the whistleblowers and Buse, the Swedish journalist whose documentary was very instrumental. And so because it was about all of us that sort of banded together unknowingly at first to take him down.
What did you think of the fiction, the more fictionalized, I guess, version of Dr. Death and Mandy Moore playing you?
That's a difficult one because they chose not to involve me, and which unfortunately, I was not involved. I was not involved at all. I was involved in the original Dr. Death podcast, and the series is a spinoff of the podcast, but they chose not to involve me in the podcast. I mean, in the fictionalized TV series, which was difficult because they're using my real name, but they're taking creative liberties, and therefore they're making things up. But because they're using my real name, people watch it and assume that that's what's really happened, and it's not. There are a lot of things in there that are completely made up. There are things in there that are wrong. So it was difficult for me to watch on a number of levels. I know obviously it's my life, my story. I don't feel like they captured me very well. I don't think they captured necessarily Paolo, certainly not the actual relationship between us. And there are a lot of things in there that are disturbingly wrong, actually. However, that said, I think the important part is that it's another story out there that exposes him, and it's another light shining on the medical fraud. And I thought they did a phenomenal job with the medical fraud. I mean, it's disturbing. There's one episode in particular about Yashim, the Turkish girl, that made me cry. Yeah. And I think it made a lot of people cry. I mean, it's so sickening what he did. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, is to shine a light on the atrocities of his medical crimes.
You've always had great instincts. Maybe you should trust them. I need you to look into someone for me.
He's experimenting on people.
I want to see it with my own eyes.
Have you ever been in contact, or did you talk to his Italian wife?
No. People often ask me, a couple of things. People get very mixed up. They think that I didn't know he was married, which is not true. I knew that from the very beginning. He told me from day one that he had been separated for many years, which was true. They lived completely separate lives. He lived in Spain, she lived in Italy. They just had never gotten separated. And people think that when I went to the house in Barcelona, that it was his Italian wife that I discovered there. That's not true. It was another woman altogether. And so I know of, and I say know of because who knows if there are more, but I now know of 4 families that he was balancing at the same time. It was me and my daughter in New York, the Italian wife in Italy that he never divorced. They had 2 children who were around 20 when we were together. Then the woman in Spain and 2 young children there. And then this other woman that came forward in the Netflix documentary very bravely, Anna Paula in Italy, who had a baby that was born with him basically at the same time that he was proposing to me. So, there are all these different families. But my take with the women is they have nothing to do with this. My complaint is with him. My problems are with him. And I feel sorry for them. I feel sad for them. But I don't feel any need to contact them, or, they've got enough to go through. Anna Paula, the one in the Netflix documentary, she did reach out to me a long time ago, or after Vanity Fair came out in 2016. But I always kept her story and her identity quiet because she asked me to, and because there's a child involved, I can't imagine having to deal with that. So she was very brave to come forward. Very, very brave.
Do you still follow what's happening to him? Is he?
Of course.
He's in prison right now, right?
He's not, and that's the problem. So he was convicted almost a year ago. It was either April or May, maybe early May of last year. And he was convicted on 3 counts of bodily harm and sentenced to 30 months behind bars, which isn't even that long, but at least it's something. But then he appealed to the Supreme Court in Sweden, and in October, they came back and said, we're not taking the case. We will not take your appeal. Your conviction stands. But that was October. So here we are, February, 4 months later, and he's still not behind bars because he's trying to negotiate with Swedish authorities to spend the time in prison in Spain on house arrest. So he basically wants to sit at home by his pool and kick up his feet and thinks that that's how he's going to serve his prison time. So I'm following it very closely, I think, and I'm in touch with the whistleblowers too. We're all very angry that he's not behind bars yet.
Does it get easier with all this time passing by, like you to have to resume a more normal routine with your life?
It does take time, and I think what I'm always telling women now is to give yourself the time. It just takes time. But when I first started dating again, I was choosing people unconsciously that I knew I would never really fall in love with, because if I never really fell in love with them, they could never really hurt me, right? So to open your heart all the way up again is very difficult. But I had made a promise to myself from the beginning when I first figured out that he was lying to me. I promised myself that I wouldn't become bitter or angry, and that I wouldn't allow him to change the essence of who I am. I've always been a very loving person with my friends and my family. I'm a diehard romantic. And I promised myself that I wouldn't become that bitter, angry woman because I didn't want him to do that to me too. He did enough damage. He took enough away from me. And I think I've done a pretty good job of keeping that promise to myself, but it's a slow process. I am now in a long-term serious relationship, very happy with a wonderful man who's very kind and loving and patient with me, which is important, and supportive. But I do have, and he's patient with me. I have little flare-ups of trust, but it's about being with somebody who understands that, and true love shows you that it is possible to be with somebody that can be kind and loving and patient.
Thank you very much. And I'm very, very happy to hear that.
Thank you. Thank you.